Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Am's Untitled Podcast. I'm Am. Hi, if you've never met me before, it's very nice to meet you. If you've just stumbled across my podcast, hi, thank you for clicking on this podcast. I hope you enjoy the content that I put out there. So, I don't really, I don't really know where to start with this because, as you guys know, I've been reviewing every book in the Percy Jackson series so far. So I'm on book 4 now, which is Battle of the Labyrinth. And I had a little bit of an issue with this because I was trying to work out what the best possible way to do this would be, because there's a lot of details in book 4 and book 5. So I've been thinking about this for a while about how I was going to do this. And what I decided to do was that I was going to split the review not into 2 parts, but into 4 parts. So each chapter I'm doing 5 chapters in each episode, basically. So in today's episode, I'm going to do chapter 1 to chapter 5. Then I'll do chapter 6 to chapter 10. 11 to 15, and then 16 to 20. So that's the way I've sort of worked it out. I just think that that's easier. I have taken a lot of notes on book 4, so I feel like these episodes are going to be long because I'm trying my best to consolidate everything, but the problem is there's so many details that are so important, and because I walk you guys through what happens in every single chapter and then I comment on it, it can take a bit of a while. And you guys know by now, if you've been listening in since I started, you know for a fact that I don't shut up and I just keep talking. And then when it comes to editing, I want to smash my head against the keyboard because I'm not being funny. I just don't shut up. And it gets to the point where I can't edit it anymore because it's like if I keep editing stuff out, I'm going to start editing out details, which is not something that I want to do. Even though this podcast isn't completely dedicated to Percy Jackson, because I love it, a, a lot of my podcast is going to be devoted to it because it's one book series that without fail I go back to every single time. Just in this year, this is my second time reading all 5 books. No regrets whatsoever about that. I love them. I'm on book 5 now. I started book 5 today. I finished book 4 in the morning and I couldn't resist and I just started taking the notes for book 5. So yeah, anyway, I'm a huge Percy Jackson fan. Again, if you haven't listened to the podcast, you're not gonna know, but I'm a huge Percy Jackson fan. And these books were from my childhood, so I'm really, really excited. I get to talk about them in my own, what would you call it? In my own style, basically, and just I would really like to do a collaboration with somebody who's a big fan of Percy Jackson. Like, I would love to sit and talk to them about this and just get their thoughts on it and the big reveals and stuff. It would be nice to have somebody to talk to about this sort of stuff. Maybe in a few years' time, if I'm still doing this and I manage to meet somebody who's as passionate about this as I am, I wouldn't mind collaborating at all. I think it would be such a good idea. And another thing that I was thinking about before I go into this podcast episode about book 4 is that I wanted to do one episode once I've done all 5 books all the way through. Just before the Chalice of the Gods one, I wanted to do an episode on Percabeth. I wanted to talk through their best moments in the book and in the TV show. So what I was thinking was I would go back through the TV show, through my notes and everything, maybe listen to a couple of these episodes to summarize it up a little bit and just like pick out iconic Percabeth moments that I think are like should be talked about or aren't talked about enough. So I was thinking I would do one episode on my favorite scenes from the books and then do another episode on my favorite moments from the TV show because I adore the TV show as well. I think Walker and Lee have done an absolutely amazing job of bringing Percabeth to life. So yeah, let me know if you guys want to hear that. It's something I would like to do. Like I was thinking about it today, and I was like, yeah, that's something I would want to do. And then maybe move on to Chalice of the Gods. But I haven't really got a clear idea yet. I've only planned the next 4 episodes, which are going to be Battle of the Labyrinth, and then I've had to split book 5 into 5 episodes, I think, because there's a lot that happens in book 5 as well that needs to be talked about. So yeah, I've kind of got the next 9 episodes, which sounds like a lot sorted, but after that, I'm not sure. We'll see. we'll see when the time comes. But yeah, let's get into this because I've realized the time and that my sister will be back from school soon. So I need to finish recording this before they get back while I still have some peace and quiet, basically. So let's just get into it. So, Battle of the Labyrinth, fourth book in the Percy Jackson series. We're going to do chapter 1 to chapter 5 today, so just stay with me. I'm going to try and do this as efficiently as possible. So, chapter 1 is I battle the cheerleading squad. So, the chapter opens with Percy sat in his mom's car outside Paul Blossus's school. So, this is the new school that Percy is going to go to after he's been kicked out of every other school that he's ever been to. And Sally is teasing him because he's got a date with Annabeth. They're planning on going to the movies. So if you didn't know, Annabeth's never seen a movie before, so Percy is basically taking her to see her first film, in other words. And as Percy is talking to Paul, um, no, he's not talking to Paul. He's sat in the car with his mum, and he sees Paul talking to a girl, and it's the same girl who he recognizes from the previous book, Rachel. So I told you guys to remember Rachel. She's important, especially in the last few books. She's very important. So yeah, he sees her and he decides to go to school using the side entrance instead of the main gate. And then just as he's walking around, he gets ambushed by a bunch of cheerleaders that tell him that they've been expecting him to show up here. So basically, in other words, they're not actually humans, they're monsters, essentially. And as they're talking to Percy, Paul appears and they sort of backtrack and they disappear, in other words. They can't cause a scene in front of a mortal, in other words. And then Percy gets spotted by Rachel. He didn't want to get spotted by her, but she manages to see him. And, she sees the cheerleaders. And obviously, if you didn't know, Rachel is a seer. So she's a human who can see through the mist. So she can see the cheerleaders for what they actually are, as opposed to what mortals perceive them to be. And she tells Percy to make a run for it, And as he's running off, he sort of blurts out that he's not a mortal and he tells her that all the stories about Greek gods and heroes and monsters are actually all real. And he tells her that he's a half blood, basically. And then he gets attacked by the cheerleaders, which is really funny. And the cheerleaders are Emposai. Is that how you say it? You see, these Greek words really confuse me. Like I don't know how you're supposed to say it, but that's what they are. That's the type of monster that they are. And he kills one of them because they try to attack Rachel, so he protects her. And then he kills the last cheerleader, and as he kills her, she sort of bursts into flames and she sets the entire school on fire, basically. And they realize that they have to make a run for it. So as they run onto this alley, Percy crashes into Annabeth, and then let's just say Annabeth and Rachel never get along, really. Let's be honest, like they've never get along. I'm not sure how I feel about Rachel as a character, if I'm truthfully honest. Like even up until this moment, like I'm still not sure how I feel about her. And then Annabeth interrogates Percy about Rachel, and Rachel sort of says to him, you owe me an explanation. Here's my phone number, take it, and then when you're ready to talk, you can ring me, basically. And Annabeth says to him, we need to get out of here. And then when Annabeth questions Percy about Rachel, she calls her kind of cute, and Percy says that he's never thought of her like that. I can smell the jealousy from here, guys. This whole book is built on this jealousy that Annabeth is feeling, and it gets more and more obvious, like as the book goes on. But we'll come to that when we get there. We'll cross that bridge when it comes, basically. And then she says, "Oh, so you've met Rachel before?" And if you didn't know, Percy met Rachel. If you haven't heard Titans Curse, I'll just quickly sum it up. He met her outside a bathroom. Um, and she could see Riptide basically, so he knew that she was a seer who can see through the mist basically. And Annabeth tells them that like we need to get to camp now, and that's where the first chapter sort of ends. So yeah, it's just there's a lot going on in that chapter. I think it's kind of like the rest of the book in that sense because there's always loads going on in one chapter. It doesn't matter if the chapter's slightly shorter. There's always a lot going on. So chapter 2 is the underworld sends me a prank call. So it opens with Annabeth and Percy in the taxi, and she's really pissed off at him. I think part of the reason is Rachel, although I don't think that that's the only reason. And Percy sort of questions her about Luke because obviously Annabeth spent that much time with him in Titan's Curse, and Percy didn't see her for that long, basically. And do you know what crushes me is the fact that Percy knows that she still likes him and she's still harboring these feelings for him even after everything that he's put her through. And we'll talk more about that relationship towards the end of this book. I think it's more important towards the end of this book. And Percy decides that he's going to call his mom just as they arrive to Camp Half-Blood to basically say, I'm not going to be coming back for a while because there's something I need to do, in other words. And Sally, obviously being the amazing woman that she is like, yeah, sure, go for it, son. Like, don't expect anything different from you. So when they arrive at Camp Half-Blood, Percy finds out that Annabeth and Clarice have actually been working on something together for a long time. But Annabeth is very repellent to tell Percy what it is. She sort of tells him, like, oh, I'll tell you later. And as he's walking into the amphitheatre, he notices a hellhound there. And just as he's about to start fighting it, a man called Quintus stops the fight and introduces the hellhound as Mrs. O'Leary, one of his companions, friends, whatever you want to call it. And he finds out that Quintus is there because Mr. D is actually away from camp on business. And then Chiron comes to talk to Percy, and Percy finds out that Grover is at a hearing with the Cloven Council of Elders to decide his fate regarding his search for Pan, basically. And yeah, there's more about that coming up. I'm not going to talk about that just yet. And he sees another another person, and Annabeth tells him that that's actually Juniper and that's Grover's girlfriend. Obviously, Grover has failed to mention to Percy that he's got a girlfriend. And in the previous book, we talked about Grover hearing Pan's voice, and he's given this story to the Cloven Council, and they don't believe him, basically. So they give him an ultimatum that, you've got 1 week to find Pan, otherwise you lose your searcher's license. And this searcher's license is everything to Grover. Like, it's his life's mission to find Pan. So for him, this is the make or break in his life. Like, he's got to find Pan. Like, he doesn't have a choice, basically. And then Annabeth tells Percy, I'll fill you in after your cabin's been inspected, basically. And as Percy enters the Poseidon cabin, he finds Tyson, and he's actually cleaned the entire cabin. And he's fixed Percy's shield that was damaged in the previous book. Now, I can't remember what actually happened to that shield. Like, for the life of me, I can't remember. I must have talked about it in the podcast, and if I haven't, oops, my bad. And it's Selena. So Selena is the head counselor of the Aphrodite cabin, and she's come to inspect the cabin. And let's say she was very, very pleased with Tyson's cleaning skills. And then as they are sat in the dining hall talking, Tyson actually reveals to Percy and Annabeth that he's in fact afraid of Grover. For some reason, he's scared of satyrs. I'm not sure why, but yeah, I just thought that was really funny. And then the next half of the chapter talks about Quintus teaching Percy swordsmanship. The first teacher that he had was Luke, and obviously Luke is gone now. So Quintus is sort of trying to help him out. And then Percy tells Tyson about what happened with Nico. And that was a very sad thing as well. But like I said, you have to listen to my reviews of Titan's Curse where I go more into detail about that. And then eventually Percy receives an Iris message where he sees Nico throwing away his Mythomagic game. And he sees him talking to a ghost about how much he wants his sister back. And he finds out that Nico actually wants to offer a soul in exchange for Bianca's to bring her back to life, basically. And then the image all of a sudden just disappears before Percy can find anything else out. And then he realizes that Nico actually wants to bring his sister back from the dead, and the soul that he wants in exchange for hers is Percy's, which is such a big, at this point, Nico hates Percy so much because Percy betrayed him. Again, you have to listen to my review of Titan's Curse where I go more into that. But he basically blames Percy for his sister's death. And whose other soul would he want in exchange for his sister's? The person who betrayed him, of course. And that's where the chapter sort of ends. So it's a big, really big, important chapter, that one. So chapter 3 is we play tag with scorpions. So in the night, an Ethiopian dracon was spotted outside the camp border. So it's like a monster, but it couldn't get in, basically. And, Percy prays to his dad for help. He's basically struggling to sort of work out what he needs to do. So he asks his father for help. And then Annabeth tells Percy that the thing that her and Clarice have been working on for so long is the labyrinth that is directly underneath camp, and it provides an entrance into camp, basically. The perfect invasion route for the Titan army who want to wipe out camp and then eventually Olympus. Annabeth tells Percy that, something has happened to Chris. So Chris was one of the boys who was friends with Luke initially, and that he had actually been inside the labyrinth and gone insane, basically. And then Annabeth tells Percy that Luke is looking for Ariadne's string so that he can basically find his way through the labyrinth in order to attack camp. And then Grover tells them that he might find Pan there because actually satyrs hate being underground. So the reason why maybe nobody's been able to find Pan is because he's not physically on ground, like he's underground, he's hiding for some reason. And then eventually Percy goes to speak to Blackjack. And after that, they decide that they're gonna. Mr. Quintus has kind of put what would you call it? Like, what's the word I'm looking for? Like a training session together, you could say. And he's put people in pairs. So he's paired Tyson and Grover together. Oh God. Yeah, let's not go into that. And he's paired Percy and Annabeth together for training. And there's a little Percabeth moment here that I've taken where she says, "Oh, your armor is crooked," and she redid the straps for me. Oh, so cute. They are so cute. Like there's nobody that can convince me that they're not cute. Even my unromantic heart thinks that they're adorable. And it's one of the few Percabeth moments in this book, which makes me really sad, like now that I say it out loud. But there's a reason behind it, and we'll come to that. And then Percy tells Annabeth about the scene that he saw with Nico talking to the ghost about Bianca's soul, basically. And they find Juniper, who's talking about her insecurities with her relationship with Grover. And as they're doing that, Juniper disappears after that conversation, and they get attacked by scorpions. And they're climbing this wall to sort of get to the top. And Percy sees a gap in between. Sorry, just hold on 1 second. Sorry, I'm back. Yeah, never mind. That's not what we were talking about. That's not important right now. So Percy tells Annabeth that, look, there's a gap in between the boulders. You squeeze in first, and I'll come directly behind you. And once they get into this gap, as they're sort of walking through it, they realize that it's actually, in fact, a corridor. So they've found an entrance to the labyrinth that was directly underneath camp, in other words. And there's another Percabeth moment here that I like to just put Annabeth grip my arm. And, it's basically her way of, she does this, so like she tends to grip somebody's arm or hold the hand when she's looking for reassurance. And, it's basically kind of Rick's way of saying that Percy is like her safe place, like she feels protected when she's with him. And then as they're walking, Annabeth's hand slipped into mine. So it's just basically that he's building that connection that, when Annabeth is in danger, like the only real person that she wants to protect her is Percy, even though she won't directly say it to him, which I think is really cute. And then as they're walking, Annabeth notices a mark, which is the mark of Daedalus, who actually has built the labyrinth, and she sees it on the wall, and she's like, yeah, this is the entrance that is going to lead Luke's arm, that Luke is going to lead the army through, basically. And then Percy and Annabeth get thrown down a ladder. I think it's Tyson that notices that they need help, and he sends a ladder down, and they basically escape out of the entrance of the labyrinth. And everybody's been wondering where they are, because for what felt like them for a couple of minutes was actually hours had passed, and everybody's been looking for them and nobody could find them, basically. And then Annabeth tells Percy that they have actually found that entrance to the labyrinth, and that is the same route that Luke is going to use to attack Camp Half-Blood, basically. So chapter 4 is Annabeth breaks the rules. So Percy has a dream about King Minos, Daedalus, and his son, remember that detail. It's going to become useful later on. I'm glad I didn't go into too much detail this time. I don't want to tell you what it is just yet. And then Chiron calls a war council, and Juniper tells them that Luke has actually used that entrance before, and she's seen him use it. He's never seen her, and she's didn't question it because she's had a crush on him. Is there any girl in Camp Half Blood that hasn't had a crush on Luke? I think the same thing about Percy. Like, is there any girl that he's come across in the last few months, bar the bullies at his face, that doesn't find him attractive? I mean, I can see why. Percy's an amazing character. He's a very attractive character. Even I can say it. Like, I've had a crush on Percy. Say that as if I don't have a crush on him anymore. I do. It's just it's weird now that it's a TV show. I'm crushing on fictional Percy. I can't crush on Walker as Percy because he's younger than me, so I find it really weird. Anyway, let's carry on. So we're not talking about TV show. We're talking about what's going on in the book, and it's revealed that Luke actually sent Chris into the labyrinth to find Daedalus's workshop, but obviously it didn't work because Chris went insane. And he wanted to convince Daedalus to help him navigate the maze so that he could attack camp, basically. Annabeth tells them that they have to find that workshop before Luke has a chance to get to him. They have to stop him from getting Ariadne's string, because once he gets that, he's going to be able to find his way around the labyrinth, basically. And then Percy and Annabeth are arguing about who's going to enter the labyrinth, and all the other counselors are like looking at each other like, should we leave, or are you guys just gonna carry on? Or yeah, it's a really good moment, like in the book. It's funny, like even though they're arguing, it's like a lover spat. It's really funny. And they all choose Annabeth. All the counselors agree that Annabeth should lead the quest, and Clarice says that she will never ever go into that labyrinth again, because she's already been into the labyrinth once. Chiron gave her a special mission, and I think that was to go and get Chris out, basically. Although I don't think that's ever explicitly stated in the book why she goes in, but I think that's why she went in. And then obviously a quest isn't quest unless the oracle says so. So Annabeth goes to consult the oracle. Juniper tells Percy that she saw Quintus actually poking around outside the entrance of the labyrinth. So something is a little bit sus there, that Mr. D's disappeared and now Quintus has arrived and he's messing about outside the entrance of the labyrinth, basically. And Percy can't stand waiting for Annabeth any longer, so he decides to go to the big house, and he hears Clarice crying as she's nursing Chris. And I like this scene because it shows a very vulnerable side to Clarice. Like, obviously, when we see her in Sea of Monsters, um, she's quite funny and she has like this comical element to her character. But this is the first time like Rick gives you an insight into her vulnerability. Like, this hard, independent, strong, fierce girl sees what's happened to her friend in inverted commas, and she just wants him to go back to normal. And I'm glad that Rick has put that scene in there. It's just, I like that he shows the characters as like having different dimensions and not just one dimensional, which I really appreciate that about his writing style. And even though the books are written in Percy's perspective, he gives every character that Percy comes across a fair amount of time and reasoning behind why that character's in there. Nobody's ever just in there as like a side character, which I like. And then Annabeth returns with the prophecy. So I will read the prophecy out to you because I took notice of that as well. So the prophecy is, you shall delve in the darkness of the endless maze, the dead, traitor, and the lost one raise. You shall rise or fall by the ghost king's hand, the child of Athena's final stand. Grover realizes that the lost one could actually be Pan, person who he's been searching for this entire time. And he decides that he's going to join in on the quest. And Annabeth asks Percy if he will come on the quest, and obviously he would never ever let her go into a dangerous situation by herself. So he says, "Yeah, sure, I'll come with you." And actually, Annabeth breaks a rule here because she actually asks Tyson to come too. And Chiron tells her, like, you're breaking a rule, like there's going to be a punishment for that. And she's just persistent about having all three of them with her. She goes, "I need them." And we know that Annabeth wouldn't ever go against the gods unless she had a genuine reason, and that reason gets revealed later on in the book. So Quintus tells Percy that he has been into the labyrinth before and that he barely escaped with his life. And he gives him actually a dog whistle, and he goes, if you're ever in danger, blow the whistle, and Mrs. O'Leary, the hellhound, who's his pet, will come and save them, basically. Percy goes into the Athena cabin looking for Annabeth, and she's just sort of reading through everything that she knows about the labyrinth to try and help her gain some sort of direction when they eventually enter it. And then Rick has also shown a more vulnerable side to Annabeth in this book. She's definitely more emotional in this book. And there's a little Percabeth moment that I want to talk about. This quote here, which is, then she did something that really surprised me. She blinked back tears and put out her arms. I stepped forward and hugged her. Butterflies started turning my stomach into a mosh pit. It's like, she can't do this without him. And I think he knows that. And I think she knows that as well. And you can tell like she's holding something back from him, like she doesn't want to hide something from him, but she's having to protect him. And I think her hugging him is just sort of her way of expressing her vulnerability without outwardly saying it. And then her half brother Malcolm interrupts the moment and says that actually Chiron is calling her for archery practice. And Percy says that I think that you've missed a line in the prophecy, and she just refuses to tell him, basically. And then she slips off to archery practice, and that's where the chapter ends. So the last chapter that I'm going to be talking about in this episode is chapter 5, which is Nico buys Happy Meal for the dead. So Percy has a dream about Luke talking to Kronos, and Kronos is basically in this massive coffin, you could say, a sarcophagus if you wanted to. And Kelly, one of the things is well, what is she? She a Fury? She a Fury? I can't remember what Kelly is actually. And she sees, and Percy can see her trying to seduce Luke, but Luke tells her, get out, basically, unless you have something to tell me. And then she's the one that actually tells Luke that he's being watched, like Percy's spying on him, basically. And that's where the dream ends. And then Percy goes to the fountain to see if he can see Nico. So he tosses a drachma. So basically, he can have see an iris image of Nico, basically. And he sees Nico in a graveyard. And he's basically burning, well, not burning an offering, but chucking coke and a Happy Meal and everything over it, the graves. So that basically, in other words, he's trying to rise the dead, in other words. And he summons Theseus to ask if he can get Bianca back, basically, find a way to bring her back. And, as they're having this conversation, Percy can see what's going on. Theseus tells him that actually somebody is coming, and then the fountain starts cracking, and the iris message disappears, and Percy basically smashes the fountain in half using Riptide. And then Percy tells Chiron about his dream, and Kronos Kronos? Not Kronos. Jesus. Chiron tells him that Luke wants to give Kronos a body. That's why he's looking for Daedalus. Like, Daedalus was supposed to be one of the best inventors ever. So he wants basically him to invent a body that Kronos can live in other words. And then Chiron tells Percy that he's actually also suspicious of Quintus. He thinks that there's something going on. And the reason why he's trusted him to come to camp is that he wants to keep an eye on him, basically. And the chapter ends with the four of them, so Tyson, Grover, Annabeth, and Percy descending into the labyrinth, and that's where the chapter finishes off. So my final thoughts on the first 5 chapters. So from the beginning, things are very intense. They're very dark. It's a very big shift in tone. Like Titan's Curse was the perfect turning point, because now it's set these next few books as being quite dark and maturing with the audience, which I really like. Rachel is reintroduced. Again, don't know how I feel about her. She's one of those characters where I think that she's a bit of a grey character, so she's not black or white, she's not good and she's not bad. At least that's how I feel about her. I don't like her for a reason that I can't say right now. I'll come back to that in the next episodes. I like that there was more of the head counselors, when they did the war council, all the head counselors from Camp Half-Blood were there. I like that Selena, all of the main people were there that need to be there, which I like. I also love that there was more Percabeth moments. There's more physical affection, you could say, between the two of them. Just like her Annabeth gripping his arm, redoing his armor, hugging him, that sort of thing. It's just sort of Rick is implying that their relationship is evolving, it's changing, and it's becoming more intense, which I like. I love that he touches on Nico's distraught over losing Bianca. That thread is very, very important in this book. Bianca, I like to say, her and Pan are probably the loose threads, the invisible strings in this book, you could say, that are very important. So yeah, I like that Rick touches on Nico pretty much straight away in the book, which is very important. And I love that there was a little bit of an insight into Luke changing into a more villainous character with a malicious intention, because that is what he becomes towards the end of the books. And yeah, I just, yeah. The first five chapters were really good. It's really tense. It's really hard to read this book, I think. It's just there's a lot going on all the time, and you've got to be on tune, paying attention, on tune, in tune, paying attention. But I wouldn't have it any other way, and I really do appreciate Rick. Because this book is probably one of my favorites in the series, and as I've like read through it, like there were bits where I laughed out loud, there was bits when I cried, and I'll talk more about those scenes when we eventually get there. But like I said, it was a great opening to the book. There was nothing about those five chapters that I would change. It gets to the point. It doesn't drag it along, which I love. I love then an author just says what they mean instead of just dragging it out or prolonging it, you could say. So yeah, really, really appreciate Rick for that. In the next episode, I'm going to be talking about the next five chapters, chapter 6 to chapter 11. So stay tuned for that. Not chapter 11, chapter 10. Yeah, and I will try and upload all these episodes together, so the next four episodes will go up together, and I'll let you guys know on Instagram when it goes up, hopefully sometime next week. I'm aiming for Thursday, but I'm not sure. So just stay with me for that, and I will speak to you guys in the next episode. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Thank you so much for listening in. I really appreciate it. I know these episodes are really long and rambly, so I'm sorry about that, but I just don't know any other way to do it. So yeah, and let me know if you want to see that Percabeth analysis from the books and the TV show. Um, all episodes will be available to stream on Spotify and on my YouTube channel, so check those out. Don't forget to follow me on Instagram. You can DM me any questions. I do check the DMs, my emails, and YouTube comments and stuff. So just if you ever need me, feel free to message me. Any questions, let me know, and I will speak to you guys in the next episode. See you in part 2 of The Battle of the Labyrinth. Bye, guys. Mwah.